Good morning, everyone. Today our learning target is solving quadratics by factoring. We are in Unit 7, Day 2. The focus of Unit 7 is solving all quadratics, and there are 5 different ways. Yesterday we talked about solving it by looking at a graph, or if we have a function in x-intercept or in intercept form already, just setting those factors equal to 0, finding the x-intercepts, and those are our solutions. Today we're going to focus on looking at a function, and we want to solve it by factoring. The first step today that you need to know is you need to make sure that the function is set equal to 0. Right away, we're okay. This function is set equal to 0. Now we're set to solve. So for all solving quadratics by factoring, you need to make sure that the function is set equal to 0. Step 2, we need to factor the function. Now some of you can factor this by guess and check. We just had a test on this not too long ago. It was our Unit 5 test. Many of you have done very well by guess and check. Continue that process. It will only help you. But for those of you who are struggling, let me show you just officially how to break this into 4 terms and then do factor by grouping. So we're going to change this 3-term quadratic into a 4-term quadratic. I'm going to go to the board now. And what I need to do is if I can factor this by guess and check, I can do it right away. Those of you who can factor by guess and check, you're going to know an x and an x goes right here. You know that our last terms need to multiply to get 10 and that the outsides and the insides need to add up to get negative 11. Okay? Well, let's do that. So that's going to be negative 10 and negative 1. That's step 2. Those of you with guess and check, you're done. But those of you who can't do guess and check very well, try practicing this with me. I'm going to take this first coefficient and multiply it by the last coefficient. 1 times 10 is equal to 10. I'm going to write out all the factor pairs of 10. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and that's it. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this function, x squared minus 11x plus 10, but I'm going to write it as x squared blank blank plus 10, always. I need to think out of these factor pairs, which ones can I fill in the blank to get me negative 11x? Well, 2 and 5 can't get me 11 when I'm adding, but 1 and 10 can. If I make this first term a negative 1x, and this second term a negative 10x, together, these 2 terms give me my middle term, negative 11x. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor by grouping. I've taught you factor by grouping already. We break this up into 2 groups. We make a template. We look at this first group here. We say, what's the GCF? The GCF here is x, so I take an x out. I say, what's left? X squared divided by x gives me an x. X over x, I'm left with a negative 1. And then right here, now I'm done with the first group. Now I look at the second group. Negative 10x plus 10. What do they have in common? They have a negative 10. How do I know I need to bring a negative 10 out? Because this leading coefficient right there is negative. I divide by negative 10. That gives me positive 1x. I divide by negative 10. That gives me minus 1. All right, how do I know I've done this right so far? These match. I write the match once, that's my GCF. I write what's left over in this parentheses. And now I've factored. So I have my factors by guess and check, or I have my work to always get it right here. Guess and check, I think, will help you in the long run, but being a smart person, you need to decide what method is going to help you to get an A. And if you have to use this method, there is no shame in that. Please do it. Step 2, we have factored the function. Well, we need to solve the quadratics by factoring. So what we need to do is we need to do what we did yesterday. We take those factors, we set them equal to 0, and we solve for x. Okay, so I take x minus 1 and x minus 10. X minus 1 is equal to 0, and x minus 10 is equal to 0. I set them equal to 0. I'm going to erase my previous work. When I solve for x, if I add x minus 1 is equal to 0, I add 1. I get x is equal to 1. And if I add 10 and add 10, x is equal to 10. Those are my two solutions for the first example. Rewind, pause where you need to always. And I'm going to go on and we're going to do two more examples together.
Jeff Rogers, dial 8833, please. Jeff Rogers, dial 8833.
I have 3r squared minus 16r minus 7 is equal to 5. Look at your notes. What is step 1? Step 1 tells us we need to make sure this is equal to 0. This is equal to 5. I can't just replace 5 for a 0. I need to do something with that 5. I need to balance it out. So I'm going to subtract 5 and subtract 5. I now have 3r squared minus 16r is equal to 7, negative 7 minus 5 gives me negative 12 is equal to 0. I'm set now to solve, okay? 3, 16, and 12, they don't have anything in common. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm either going to factor it using guess and check, or I'm going to do turning it into 4 terms again. Pause it right now if you're going to do guess and check. Get the guess and check, and then you can fast forward through the factor by grouping. If you can't do guess and check, do the factor by grouping with me. We're going to take 3 times negative 12. That gives us negative 36. We want to say, what are the factor pairs of negative 36? Well, it can be 1 and 36, right? It can be 2 and 18. It can be so on and so forth. But right away I notice, oh, 2 and 18. I can get 16 out of that. Okay, I can get 16 out of that. And now these are the factor pairs. And notice this is a negative. So one number has to be negative. How do I know that? Because when I multiply 3 times negative 12, I get a negative 36. What am I going to do next? I'm going to rewrite it. 3r squared, blank, blank, minus 12. And I know that 2 and 18, I can get negative 16 that way. How can I get it? If I have a negative 18r and a positive 2r. Okay, the variables always go in there. Negative 18r and 2r, that gives me negative 16r. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it up into my groups. I'm going to say,
Bill McCloskey, call Patty. Bill McCloskey, dial 8818.
I'm going to look at my GCF. 3 and 18, r squared and r. My GCF there is going to be 3, so and an r. So I'm going to take a 3r out. What am I left with? Well, 3r squared divided by r gives me r. Divide by 3r. Negative 18r divided by 3 gives me a negative 6. Here, again, I'll make my template. My GCF of 2r, negative 12. I'm going to take a 2 out. There's my GCF. I'm left with r minus 6. What do I do next? I have my match. I have my match of r minus 6. I'm going to write once. I have my leftovers, 3r plus 2. Now what am I going to do? I factored it. Now I need to set each factor equal to 0. So r minus 6 is equal to 0, and 3r plus 2 is equal to 0. I'm going to add 6 and add 6. So I get r is equal to 6. I'm going to subtract 2. 3r is equal to negative 2. Divide by 3, divide by 3. r is equal to negative 2/3. I have now solved the quadratic by step 1, making sure it's equal to 0. Step 2, I have factored it either through guess and check, or if you struggle with guess and check, doing the long way. Step 3, I set each factor equal to 0 and solve. I have one more to do with you as a group, and then one final thing to talk about. I have 5r squared minus 44r plus 120 equals 30 plus 11, or excuse me, is it negative 30 plus 11r. Okay, so this step 1, this is not equal to 0. I need to get this equal to 0 by adding 30. Well, where do I add it? I need to combine like terms. I need to subtract 11r. Subtract 11r. I have 5r squared minus 55r plus 150 equals 0. I know that 5, negative 55, and 150 all have a GCF. That GCF is 5. I take that 5 out, I'm left with r squared minus 11r plus 30 equals 0. Okay, now I can factor, guess, and check. I'm going to do the factor and guess and check quick. If you want to pause and try it, I'm going to get 5 times r minus 6 times r minus 5. If I can do guess and check, I'm almost done. I set each factor equal to 0, and I'm going to get r equals 6 and r equals 5. If you can't do guess and check, again, I'm going to do the 4 termers with you. Some of you can fast forward this part and go to the next slide if you don't need it. Okay, the 4-term one. I know it's going to be, I'm not going to worry about this 5 right now. I'll just keep it like, actually I'm not even going to worry about it right now because that's a factor, but I can't solve for anything right there. So what do? I take r squared blank blank 30. I have a 1 here. I'm going to multiply 1 times 30. The 5 I'm just going to disregard right now because I can't do anything with solving. 1 times 30 is 30. What are the factor pairs of 30? The factor pairs of 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. Okay? That's all my factor pairs. Now I say, out of these factor pairs, how can I get to negative 11? Well, if I take 6 and 5, and I make them both negative, that can get me to negative 11. So negative 6r minus 5r. Now I'm going to break it up. I'm going to look and see what's in common. R squared and negative 6r, that's going to be r. I'm going to divide by r, I'm left with r minus 6. Right here, negative 5r and 30, what do they have in common? That's a negative 5 because of that leading coefficient. I'm left with r minus 6 again. I look at my match. I write it once. I write my leftovers, r minus 5, and now I have my factors. That's step 2. So either through guess and check or through the long way. I don't care. Once you have your factors, you set them equal to 0. R minus 6 is equal to 0. R minus 5 is equal to 0. R is equal to 6. R is equal to 5. Okay, a couple quick reminders. Don't forget about perfect squares. So if I have x squared minus 121 equals 0. I have a perfect square here and a perfect square here. So I can take the square roots of both. The square root of x squared is x. I write it twice. The square root of 121 is 11. I have a plus and I have a minus. Now I set those factors equal to 0, and you should understand that x is equal to negative 11 and x is equal to a positive 11. The last thing I want to remind you on, you can't always do guess and check. Sometimes when you have a 2-termer, let's say you have 7x squared plus 14x equals 0. I can't do the long factor by grouping, but you should remember, I used to call this the golden rule in factoring. The golden rule is don't forget about the GCF. The GCF there is 7x, so I'm going to take a 7x here and a 7x here. I have a 7x on the outside. I have an x here when I divide. When I divide here, I have a 2 is equal to 0. I can't factor any further. I set each factor equal to 0. X plus 2 equals 0. Now, don't disregard this GCF. I could disregard my GCF down here because 5 setting that equal to 0, that doesn't make sense. I can't solve for anything. But I can solve this one. If I set 7x equal to 0, and I solve for x by dividing by 7 and dividing by 7, I get x is equal to 0. So the answer is x is equal to 0, minus 2, and x is equal to negative 2. All right, I'm almost done. Solving by factoring. We have our 3 steps down. We have a couple different variations. Hopefully you've been pausing where you need to, fast forwarding if necessary as well. The last thing I want to talk about is on the homework. It may ask you to draw and write a possible quadratic equation with the given zeros, 4 and negative 5. After all this work with factoring, hopefully you can understand how to go backwards. This was a solution, and this was a solution. So now what they're doing is they're saying, hey, look, we have a solution here and here. Can you get back to the original problem? So this is what this next page is doing. It's saying, I have a solution here and here. Can you give me a possible quadratic equation that would go with those solutions? Okay, so let's actually pause and write that down. 4 and negative 5. Well, I know that those had to come from factors, okay? I'm going to just take the opposite. X minus 4, that factor, if I set that equal to 0, and I solve for x, just like I've been doing, that gives me a solution of 4. So I know that this factor here, this gives me a solution of 4. Now again, I'm going to take the opposite here, so I'm going to take x plus 5. So that's all you're doing is you're taking the opposite of what you see here. Again, you're taking the opposite of what you see. X plus 5, if that was my factor that I had, and set that equal to 0, that gives me negative 5, our solution. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this out to get it into standard form. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. I'm going to take x squared. I'm going to take 5x minus 4x, which is x. And then I have negative 20. And I'm going to say this is equal to y.
Cameron Opal, call Patty, 8818. Cameron Opal, call Patty.
All right, I have my standard form of an equation now. If I change that y to a 0, I had to solve it. I could factor it, get 4 and negative 5. It does want me to give you a possible sketch. It's just a possible. All I care in this is that you have your 0 on 4 and your 0 on negative 5. I don't care if you should have it up, I guess, if you have it positive like that. You should have it going up. All right, Unit 7, Day 2, Solving Quadratics by Factoring. Again, like I said, hopefully you paused where necessary, fast forwarded where necessary as well. Everyone, have a great day.